There's always a big question. We've talked to Dr. Chandra Wick-Ramsey on panspermia. We've talked about theories on our creation, humankind, the hominid known as Homo sapiens sapien. Are we an accident? Are we a creation of some advanced race? And this has been a question now that we've pondered over for the last many, many years. Today, my guest is Christopher Knight. He and his co-author, Alan Butler, have written a book called They Built the Earth, Then Seeded Life 3.7 billion years ago. And then the second line is, It's time to unlock the message they left, which is a fascinating title for the book we're presenting today. And this is a look at a hypothesis that is fairly radical, but also has a place in our understanding of the past. So, hey, Chris, welcome to Earth Ancients. Great to have you on the program.
Good to be with you, Cliff.
Give us a sense of what you and Alan, I should say, how you started, because this is a big question. What would be a sense of starting for you on this?
Well, we had no interest in the subject matter. We didn't set out to prove a theory or a hypothesis that we'd got at all. In fact, we'd spent many years working together researching megalithic metrology, that is, units of measurement used in the late Stone Age, which are for sure there. They cover units of length, time, capacity, weight, everything. Doesn't sort of make sense in standard history, but it's provably there. Well, we were continuing our researches in this area, and I can't remember how, but we suddenly found that it works for the Earth. It's a geodetic system. It's based on these units come from the physical nature of the Earth, but they also work for the Moon in complete detail with great accuracy, but nowhere else in the solar system. Alan and I scratched our heads and thought, this is just crazy. How could Stone Age men have measured the Moon? And even then, they couldn't have controlled the ratio and the size between the Earth and the Moon. And so we got drawn into this. We ended up writing a book 25 years ago now called Who Built the Moon? Because for sure it's not a natural object. And we've spent the last 25 years researching further, because we don't write books for fun. You know, we're researchers, and we just periodically write a book to share what we've found. You know, it's not a business proposition for us. It's just a hunger to understand what is. And we've had to change our minds on everything. That all our preconceived ideas have gone out the window. So we got dragged into it by accident, basically. That's all I can say. But once in there, you can't get out. You've got to keep digging.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up this megalithic yard, because I've studied the work of Professor Thom.
Yeah.
And he is just so brilliant for the time he lived. And when he started discussing this megalithic yard, he was summarily pressed and almost outed by the Society for Archaeological Research. Of course,
absolutely.
Talk a little bit about his discovery of the megalithic yard.
Okay, very briefly. Alexander Thom was a renowned engineer. He was professor of engineering at Oxford University, a Scot by birth. And he spent half a century surveying ancient megalithic sites and doing a detailed engineering assessment of them. And he said, no good being an archaeologist, you've got to be an engineer to understand what they were engineering.
Yeah.
It's a wrong mindset, because archaeologists are very good digging up bits of pottery and the odd bone or two, but they're useless when it comes to maths. I've spoken to so many of them that haven't a clue. And they criticize Thom because they basically don't understand it. They feel threatened. So he said that, well, the archaeologist said to him, how could they have done that? And he said, it's no business of mine how they did it. I just know that they did do it because the evidence is overwhelming. So Alan and I set out many moons ago to try and work out how they did do it, which we've succeeded in doing. Alexander Thom's closest friend, professor of astronomy at Glasgow University, joined in with us and said what a breakthrough it was. He said, if only Sandy, that's Alexander Thom, was still alive, he would love this. And we've had other leading academics from other spheres, engineers from South Africa, professor of chemistry and physics, PhD in both subjects from Canada, checking our work, checking Thom's work. And they've said both are correct. Thom was right, and Alan Butler and I are right in working out how they did it. But then we accidentally find that it applies to the Moon. And then where do you go next?
Yeah.
It was a jolt, to put it mildly, for us, because we're interested in the pyramids and things, because we were finding these megalithic units are used here in England 1,000 years before the pyramids were built. But the layout of the pyramids, the Giza Plateau pyramids, that is identical, but much smaller than structures they built 1,000 years earlier in England, not in terms of mass or height, but in ground area. And they both follow exactly the same rules of Orion's belt using megalithic units. So something huge was going on.
I expect, Chris, that say 4,000 years ago was the inception, but it really feels to me that it's much, much older than that, simply because it's a very sophisticated way of measuring large bodies.
But what has become clear, and we're talking about over 5,000 years ago, but what is clear is that they were using something, they were sort of resurrecting something that had existed long before them. They were using their technology to recreate something that had been in place way, way before that. They couldn't have originated it, but they worked out how to recreate it. So we've been pushed back in time massively. There really is. I have to say, I was a pretty conventional thinker until this happened to us, and I was quite happy to believe the standard textbooks, but not anymore. When you've got the masses of information and you look at the data coolly, you've got to say something seriously weird has been going on here.
Talk about the weirdness for a minute. I mean, you said the megalithic yard is used for measuring what? Planets? Of course, you're also referring to your homeland, which is places like Stonehenge and Avebury and these other megalithic sites, measuring those structures. But why is the megalithic yard so impressive?
Well, it's impressive for all sorts of reasons. I mean, I could be washed up on a desert island with nothing, with the clothes I stand up in. And I could, just by gathering materials, I could work out to 99.9% accuracy the litre, the pound, the ounce, the mile, the kilometre, the litre, and the pint, anything you want, because I understand the rules that underpin it all. It all comes from astronomy, but these ancient engineers couldn't have originated it any more than the Greeks originated the work that they did, because when they first measured the circumference of the Earth, it was an exact number of Greek feet. And that's because the Greek foot was created as a subset of the Earth in the first place. So they were reverse engineering it. And the same is true for the megalithic yard. I mean, the situation is that on the Earth, there were 366 degrees to a circle. So because there are 366 turns of the Earth in a year, it feels like 365 because one gets wound off with our orbit around the sun, but it is 366 if you look at any star. So the Earth's pin number, if you like, is 366. And they divided the Earth into 366, and then they subdivided again and again until they get 366 yards to a second of arc in the polar circumference. So, as I say, I can't remember what made us do it, but we found on the moon it's exactly 100 to a tiny exactitude. And of course, there's lots of strange things about the moon. We know, for example, that it is exactly 1/400th of the distance between us, the Earth, surface of the Earth, and the sun, and that it is 400 times smaller. So because of that 400 and 400, we get this remarkable thing called an eclipse, which we take for granted because it happens, but it doesn't happen anywhere else that we've ever, not even vaguely on any other planet. And it's such a round number, 400, and then you get the 100 yards per second of arc. And then you find all the numbers in the moon and the Earth. And then we found one other place as well that was connected out in the asteroid belt. And they are playing the same numbers, repeating them, because they want to communicate these numbers. And we believe we know why these numbers are important. But clearly, these were there billions of years ago, these relationships. So I said we're talking about something weird. It's weird and extreme, but you can't escape it because stats is merciless. When you look at you can't escape it. The chances of these patterns emerging by accident are zero, absolute zero.
Talk real briefly, then we'll move on. What did Alexander Thom, I mean, he termed it the megalithic yard, but did he see it across different cultures, the Egyptians, the Sumerians?
No, because he only, he surveyed so many sites, but across the British Isles, England, Scotland, Wales, and parts of France, like Brittany, which has very similar sorts of structures, and he analysed those very carefully. But he wasn't trying to be an archaeologist or a historian. He wasn't trying to find anything other than proving that these measurements were used. Subsequently, Alan Butler and I have done exactly that, looked at what the Sumerians were doing and the Egyptians were doing, and without shadow of a doubt, they were using the same techniques and adopting them to their own requirements. And we still use today, of course, the Sumerian timekeeping system, which is based on 60s and 10s in the minutes and seconds and minutes in an hour and seconds in a minute, etc. 60 and degrees in a circle has been turned is 360 because the Sumerians changed the 366 to the 360 because it was easier to manipulate once they'd invented mathematics. They knew it was wrong, but they had ways of correcting for that error. It was just easier to use in the first place. Likewise, the Egyptians, when you find that the Great Pyramid, for example, is said to exhibit the existence of pi. Well, it does. And the reason is that they used their trundle wheel with a circumference of 1 megalithic yard. I think it's 220 along each side. And then they used the diameter to measure the height. They call that a royal cubit to measure the height. And you automatically get pi because you've used the circumference for one purpose and the diameter for the other. So, of course, it exhibits pi. But they use the megalithic yard, that's for sure.
It seems like it's a real organic mathematical system that we're not using anymore.
Well, we are.
Are we? So is it geometry? Is that what we're...
No, every unit of the imperial system, the ones that are still used and the ones that have gone out of use, bushels and so forth, come from this, and so do the metric system. They're both descended from it, if you like. They're all interconnected.
Okay, so it's like the foundation for what we're using today.
Yeah, I mean, an Italian team of investigators at a university in Italy wrote, how is it, why does a meter-long pendulum beat at once a second? Couldn't work it out. Well, that's a really strange coincidence, only it's not a coincidence. That's what it comes from. They use pendulums. And
so it's really a sacred science that we just accept now. It's been handed down from the Greeks.
Were very good gatherers of knowledge, like the Library of Alexandria, which is basically a Greek structure, Alexandria itself being Macedonian. They were great reinventors. They catalogued things and they searched and they did a great job, but they weren't necessarily very original. They were bringing together ancient knowledge that they didn't fully understand, as I suspect the megalithic people before them had done. God knows where they got it.
Right. So your hypothesis is that Earth and its companion, the moon, are engineered from an advanced race. What are the signs of advanced engineering? Let's start with the moon.
Well, it's hard to take them in isolation, but the moon is the most unlikely object. As I say, it's in this strange position. When viewed from the surface of the Earth, i.e. human perspective, this 400 and 400 relationship, it's got an incredibly low mass. Some people say it's hollow, which isn't quite accurate, but its center of gravity is not in the middle where you would expect an astronaut. It has these masgons around the outside, 7 areas where there is concentrations of gravity, which causes havoc for spacecraft when they get to the moon. There is nothing natural about the moon. And when Alan Butler and I wrote Who Built the Moon, we took apart the idea that it was created, because we know it's largely built of material taken from the Earth, plus other material. And there was a theory that a Mars-sized object had hit the Earth. There'd been this gigantic event throwing off all this material that's then coalesced into the moon. But everyone sort of knew that didn't work for all sorts of reasons. It wouldn't spin, it wouldn't be where it is, it didn't work at all. So Alan and I suggested that it had been hit many times in a constructed way to sort of hammer out the Earth, and to deliberately manufacture the moon. And since we wrote Who Built the Moon, an Israeli team have come forward and have demonstrated that exactly is the case. Yeah, and which is now accepted. It's clean. There is nothing in this book that isn't all the core material is fully accepted by various disciplines of science. They just don't put it together. There's no one putting the pieces together. If this is true, and this is true, and this is true, and you all say it is, this has to be true.
Let me just stop you for a minute, Chris, because the what you're saying, though, is that this is a direct panspermic kind of event where it's intelligently designed by some
If
super race to
okay,
talk about that for a minute.
yeah,
You use panspermia throughout the book.
Francis Crick, the guy that was one of the discoverers of the double helix of DNA. 20 years after doing that, he came up with the idea of directed panspermia, and then supported by people like Carl Sagan and various others. And increasingly, it's more and more supported because it's utterly impossible to any honest scientist to say that it happened by accident. The idea that, a lightning bolt struck the old primeval soup and life just came into existence, that is provably nonsense.
Yeah.
So respectable scientists talk about panspermia, i.e. bacteria or some DNA life form coming from outer space. But directed panspermia is suggested that it was targeted at us. Now, if you think about it, anyone thinks about it logically, if you were going to plant life on Earth, you wouldn't just scatter it any old how on a happy, light-looking planet. You'd engineer it to be an incubation unit.
Yeah.
You'd make sure, like any decent farmer, you'd make sure the soil was right, the moisture was right, the weeds weren't there, the death threats weren't there, all of that stuff, which is what they did. And they created, the Earth has got liquid water on it all the time these days. In the past, it has been frozen, but that's 1/10,000th of the range of temperatures throughout our solar system. It's just, the Goldilocks zone isn't in it. I mean, it is amazing. And if the moon wasn't exactly where it was originally, which was much closer in, and if it hadn't moved out exactly as it is, we wouldn't be here to talk about it.
Yeah, because of the gravitational pulls, and it kind of helps Earth support life, is what you suggest.
Absolutely. The whole thing has been a precision job from the first DNA, which hasn't evolved because all of the information was in the original DNA. And it's been allowed to unpack itself over 3.7 billion years to us. But it could not have happened by accident. Scientists say, if every molecule, every particle in the universe, the entire universe, had one chance for every second it's been in existence to turn into DNA, there still wouldn't be any DNA. The odds are beyond, this can't be measured. It could not have happened by accident. It was done deliberately. And once you are brave enough, as Francis Crick and Carl Sagan and others have been brave enough to say, let's face it, and you get people overturning their whole life's work who are brave enough to say, I've got to say, I'm in my 80s now, but everything I thought was wrong because there's zero chance of life starting on its own. It just isn't an option. So you can only get on with the serious debate once you bite the bullet and say, that paradigm is nonsense. Clear the decks. Let's talk about what's real instead of this sort of, basically the old idea of lightning strike through the primordial soup is no better or worse than the Book of Genesis. It's just, it's a belief system, which is fine. You have it if you want, but it's in no way is it any different. It's just,
I mean, the thing that I'm trying to understand, and you hint on the book, is what's the signatures of a technology involved in this? I mean, if we're talking about billions of years ago, this must be a culture that we can barely conceive of it, being able to create a planet, being able to make it inhabitable for hominins, for creatures to live.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just mind-blowing.
Yes, it is. But a lot of what we do today would have been mind-blowing, to people 400 years ago, 300 years ago, whatever. We can do things that are just beyond all reason. So the fact it seems remarkable doesn't make any difference. It's like Alexander Thom. He's saying, I can't explain the megalithic yard. I'm just telling you it's there.
Yeah.
So we just need that sort of clarity of thinking. Let's not cloud the issue and saying we can't allow things unless we can explain them.
Yeah.
The fact is, it was manufactured. And it makes perfect sense. And I suspect personally that we're the only life in the entire universe. A lot of people don't want to believe that. And they may be right that there's other aliens, but I don't think so, personally, from the evidence.
You bring up NASA's Dawn mission and the Circe's discovery, not discovery, but more of the actual investigation. Why is this important?
Well, when we brought Ellen and I had Who Built the Moon published 25 years ago, we pointed out all these mathematical measurement-based connections which are utterly impossible between the Earth and the Moon. based on the sun that appeared to be a signpost. You know, they were signposting something because they kept these same numbers, very detailed numbers, the 3 decimal places, keep on reoccurring and reoccurring. And we published that, and we think NASA got to read that and got thinking about it, and they spotted something, and that's the Little Planet series, which sits out there in the between us and Mars, and it's so small, but it's just big enough to be a sphere, and its relationship to the moon is exactly the same as the moon's relationship to the Earth. The moon is 3.66 times smaller than the Earth. Ceres is 3.66 times smaller than the moon. The moon has got a mass that is 1/81st to that of the Earth. Ceres has a mass that is 1/81st to the moon. And 81 is interesting because it's 3 to the power of 4. They keep playing these number games, and the chances of those two things happening are so unlikely because the Dawn mission was cancelled. They were going to go to have a look at Ceres, and they cancelled it. Then our book came out. Within 2 years, they had it up running again. And we'd like to think that it was because of what we pointed out in that book. And certainly when they finished the project, within days, they announced that they were now changing their tack and looking for signposts for high technology that are not human-based, not Earth-based. So there was a very distinct change once they'd completed that mission.
Did they actually use the language of looking for technology signatures? I think you call it techno-signatures.
Yes, techno-signatures,
And
which by which they meant the signs of sophisticated technology that have got nothing to do with humans, or humans as we know it.
And what signatures did they find? Did they ever report them? Of course, that would be admitting the fact that there are aliens, and that's been a challenge for NASA since the day they were started.
For sure, but I don't think it's got much to do with aliens. But that is what they declared their intent was, and as far as I'm aware, they haven't published any detailed findings on it, but they admitted that's what they were doing.
Yeah, I'm curious because over 20, probably closer to 30 years ago, Russian scientists made an astounding statement that the moon Phobos, which was circling Mars, was artificial. And when they made that statement, most of the American scientific community shot it down on a number of levels. But the Russians actually sent Phobos satellite, 2 different satellites, to scan the surface of this moon. And there were a number of very, very anomalous, strange features that made it seem like it could have been man-made.
Once you open this Pandora's box and intellectually open your mind that these things are not impossible. The only things that are impossible are the old ideas like life spontaneously coming into existence. That is impossible. But it's not impossible that there are artificial structures. The Earth was remodeled and the moon was made. Beyond any argument, any serious scientist that wants to argue, they'll have to argue away a lot of data. It's not a matter of who are you? I'm more important than you. My opinion's more important than your opinion. It's nothing to do with that. It's like, just crunch those numbers and tell me again.
Yeah. Exactly.
The numbers speak for themselves. You know, Alan and I don't have a job to do. We've presented them to the world, and we're saying to the world, now get on them.
What's fascinating to me, and we've had a number of scientists and research investigators on Earth Ancients to speak on this topic, but these hominids, these different creatures, it seems like there's been starting and stopping of various experiments here on Earth where there's these ape-like creatures, and then there's these Neanderthal and Denisovans and Homo sapiens, and then Homo sapiens sapiens. What's your thinking on the Earth as this huge petri dish, and who's the one who's setting these creatures up? I mean, is it direct panspermia that is the foundation for this scientific test, or is it more like aliens are placing these creatures to see if they'll live and last?
No, I think there's a full awareness. There was a full awareness 3.7 billion years ago of where it will bring us to, and it is to today, because these number values that we see only apply right now in this current human period. So that the message is there for us. And DNA suddenly materialized with all this complex programming in it. And through the 3.7 billion years of its existence. So it suddenly arrives as complicated as a spacecraft. I mean, the first bacteria was no little simple thing. It was a massively complex piece of engineering. Humans are only here right at the tail end, just thickness of a piece of paper across a mile, in terms of what's happened.
Yeah.
But the first bacteria was fired, if you like, by viruses. And viruses keep turning up and changing everything. They're like little reprogrammers. And you can see at various key points through the billions of years and millions of years where there are big time changes. And they've been increasing and increasing. How come people started building pyramids at the same time all around the world? How did language suddenly materialize so very recently? How did, go back a bit further, how did suddenly mammals appear from reptiles? Bang, bang. You get these, and it's all to do with viruses landing on the bacteria and reprogramming them. Viruses aren't considered by mainstream science to be a living entity. And yet they're like a spacecraft. They're very complex. They land on the bacteria, land on their legs, and they have got this central injector. And some of them inject their own DNA into the DNA of the bacteria to reprogram it, because a piece of DNA is a program. It's a massively complex program. So I suspect we get these sudden changes happening because we're having the dial fine-tuned by, we call it the UCA, Unknown Creative Agency.
Yeah.
In the book, we say that this unknown creative agency decided to put life on Earth and put this pre-programmed DNA on Earth after they'd carefully constructed the whole incubator to take it. And then at appropriate points, they adjusted and adjusted. And they keep on adjusting. So they're fine-tuning the machine as they go. It wasn't a one-off panspermia, spray it and go.
That's what's fantastic, Chris, is that they are continuing to pepper Earth with new alterations in DNA. I got Wick Ramsey to say that his belief is that these viruses are the basis for COVID and other diseases that we're dealing with, because they're modifiers. They're modifying who we are.
Absolutely.
Is it your belief that these beings are still among us?
Well, in the book, we leave till the end the discussion on the identity of this unknown creative agency. We can only think of three possibilities, but the evidence comes down massively in favor of one of them because they know exactly what's going to happen next. It's impossible to escape the conclusion that they appear to be humans from our own future. We're time traveling backwards to make sure that they get the future that they want.
I was trying to wait. I was trying to wait a little bit longer to spill the beans on that, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
You're giving it up right now, and this is it's a profound implication if it's true that we're looking at our future.
If we don't handle this properly, because they've given us all of the information, maybe there won't be a future, because it's arriving at the point at which we are brilliantly able to dispatch ourselves forever and then kill all life on Earth, whether it's creating COVID-type viruses or nuclear weapons or overpopulation or whatever else, global warming, climate change, whatever else. We need to do something now. And serious scientists, very serious scientists, have said for years that it could well be that there's a huge message. It's been called Encyclopedia Galactica, buried inside our DNA, all DNA on Earth, because all life is one, which if we only knew how to extract it, would tell us exactly what we need to do next. Well, all these number patterns that they keep repeating are giving us the values to put into the system to break the code, if you like, and to open the message that's in DNA. So what Alan and I are trying to do with this book is nudge the powers that be in the scientific community to wake up and smell the coffee and realize that this is a really big chance to save us from our own stupidity. Because if we don't, the people in the future know that they will probably not exist. It's like the plot from a movie. And a lot of people have a problem with that in terms of time travel and going back to build the moons. But no scientist has a problem with it. Any physicist will say that's entirely possible.
Yeah, and you mentioned that in your book a lot, that the scientists, when they start looking at the numbers, they don't seem to have a great deal of problem with this.
No, not at all. But it's counterintuitive. But then I say to people, if you read about quantum mechanics, it's sort of counterintuitive because you've got an object that has to spin round twice before it returns to the place where it once was. And you've got electrons that are communicating across the full width of the universe instantaneously. Those things should not be possible, but people accept that quantum mechanics is there. So why do some people have more difficulty with believing scientists when they say time travel is not an issue?
Yeah, it's funny because it brings up a whole bunch of other topics like UFOs and UAPs. There's a branch of ufology which believes that these individuals who are flying in these crafts are us,
Yes.
future, and they're basically anthropologists studying our development.
I think the first part of that is almost certainly true. The second part, that they're studying us as anthropologists, is a reasonable sort of explanation of why they might be doing it. I mean, I remember, in the 1990s talking to NASA people in Seattle, other places, and they assured me that there was all sorts of footage which hadn't been shown where people in the space shuttle were routinely saying, yep, they're here again, here they come. And they told me, they said, we don't think they're aliens. We strongly suspect that the formal NASA line internally was that they are some aspect of humans that are just somehow apart from us.
Really?
And I thought that was too much information for me at the time. And I thought, I can't handle that. But over the years, it suddenly made more sense that people aren't going to travel X number of light years or hundreds of light years to have a look at us, but people from our own future. Yeah, why not?
What are some of the signs that our DNA is being manipulated, Chris? I mean, you bring up the fact that it's a brilliant piece of biological engineering to start with, but it has its own, we don't really understand its full function yet. We've broken down the genome of the DNA. We know all that kind of detail. Is it just that we have to keep looking at it and breaking it down further?
Well, the DNA that's been broken down has been principally involved with the reproduction of the species, which is part of what's held in DNA. But the bigger part of it is what used to be called junk DNA.
Yeah.
With no apparent function. So they thought, well, that's just rubbish. It's just detritus collected there, but it's not. And an increasing number of scientists are saying maybe that's the really important bit. But the interesting thing is that it hasn't changed. That part, used to be called the junk DNA, has not been allowed to change from day one, 3.7 billion years ago. It's fixed. The other bit can have trial and error amendments as it goes along, the Darwinian type evolution. But the really important bit is fixed in time. It's as it was left there. So that arguably is the message part for us that we need to investigate. It's completely separate to the part that allows a species to reproduce itself. But the difficulty has been, where do you start to understanding it? Well, the message has been put into astronomical events around us, the Earth itself, the Moon, Ceres, taken from the Sun. And again, experts have said, if you want something to last, it has to be either very, very, very small, like DNA, or very, very, very big, like a planet. Those things endure. Things in between get crushed and lost and changed, and mountains come and mountains go. Species come, dinosaurs come, and then they go. But what hasn't changed is the relationship between these bodies in our solar system, these key, as far as we're concerned, key bodies, and our DNA. And there is some of that DNA still, the original DNA, still in existence in Western Australia, for example. There are small areas where the original DNA is there just in case we lose it. So there's a big, serious story here. It sounds like something from a movie. I mean, Roland Emmerich made his film Moonfall after reading Alan Lamai's last book, Who Built the Moon, because it tickled his fancy, and he spent umpteen million.
You read about that, yeah.
And he credited us with it, but his storyline was pretty pathetic compared to the real storyline. But it's moved on so much. It sounds like an Arthur C. Clarke sort of novel, but it's not, because you break it down. Each part is for real and testably, checkably there. And there's a host of scientists defending each part of it. So there's no part of it that we've invented and saying, oh, we believe it's true. All we're saying is that all these scientists are already in violent agreement. They're just not putting it together to come to the ultimate conclusion because they're scared of it.
Have you seen the work of Dr. Wainwright? He's a Brit, and he took Wick Ramsey's idea a step further and was capturing minerals and deposits in our atmosphere and discovered that there were engineered molecules that actually were giving off bits and pieces of DNA and other viruses and things like that. And he was summarily shunned by the scientific community. And now he's kind of resurfaced a little bit because people are more accepting of his theories on panspermia.
Well, it's like if anyone speaks about Atlantis, they are shunned as, oh, God, crazy. And if anyone speaks about, is there some technology in the pyramids of the Giza Plateau, they're shunned. And maybe they're not right, but everything should be looked at in its own way and assessed. They know, for example, that it takes just 2 hours for viruses, because they're so high up in the atmosphere, to go around the whole planet. So they can adjust everything virtually simultaneously. It is astonishing, but people like that have got to be brave. We need more bravery. The problem is, you see, the peer-reviewed system for articles in academic journals, it's a great idea to keep out silly stuff, I suppose, but it does tend to serve the old ideas, however weak they are.
Yeah.
Because if there are the people doing the peer review really believe A, B, and C, they hate somebody, comes along and says D, E, F. So it doesn't get published, but slowly, things move.
He took a micron, very powerful microscope, and actually found these artificial spores that at a certain part of a certain phase of their descension from outer space into the Earth's atmosphere, they burst and give off their contents.
Yeah.
That was the damnedest thing. And Chandra Wick Ramsey and him actually wrote a number of papers based on his research. And it's so mind-blowing because it's artificial. You can see they're little capsules.
But it's engineering, isn't it? It just reeks of engineering.
It's total engineering. Yeah. So I don't know. I want you to explain a little bit the unknown creative agency, which is what you term for the brilliance of planet building, as well as, I would think, the creation of Homo sapiens sapien.
Can you give me that in a question?
You're terming UCA, unknown creative agency, as the force behind Earth creation. But if you take it one step further, the brilliance of creating a creature is also part of that.
Yeah, sorry, right. For my money, all life on Earth is one, remembering that we've got our DNA is 60% the same as a daffodil. All life on Earth is one. Fungus came first, then animals and plants. There's this continuum. And we clearly are the Homo sapiens sapien is the pinnacle because we are able to think and make tools and make judgments and achieve technology. But even that's down to the virus that infected the bacteria billions of years ago and caused it to produce oxygen. And oxygen was poisonous to the very creatures that were producing it. And it killed them all eventually, oxygen they produced. But if our atmosphere hadn't been oxygenated, we couldn't have had fire, which means we wouldn't have metrology, we wouldn't have glass, we wouldn't be able to keep warm, we wouldn't have been able to become the humans that we are today. So there's a real long line of happy events that lead to us. And I don't think we're different personally, I don't think we're necessarily different to anything else. We're just the thinking pinnacle of life on the planet.
So let's take that one step a little further. What are the signatures of an advanced human, Earth human, no matter how many billions of years? I think it's kind of funny that it's an amazing hypothesis because you're saying we survive for hundreds of millions of years, and then at some point we create the ability to go back in time.
Yeah, but I think that point is probably about 5 to 10 years away.
What? How many years?
5 to 10 years away.
That we can actually go back.
Yes, because we will have the instructions in how to do it in the DNA. Once we apply these huge strings of numbers that materialize that we've been given, we'll be able to open that message. And the message will say, here's what you do, guys.
So you're actually saying that the DNA will be able to read the engineering blueprints.
Yeah,
For,
it'll essentially give us the engineering blueprints of how to build drones to go back to build the moon, and it'll tell us how to do everything. And we'll have created the loop, completed the loop then. So we're not talking about humans from tens of thousands of years' time. We're talking about people that are alive today that will be able to do that if we investigate the DNA, the so-called junk material, using these number sequences. I mean, there's enough scientists, serious, heavy-duty scientists out there saying, if only we could do that. Well, here's the number sequences. It's like being given the number sequences for opening Fort Knox. If only we knew how to open these locks, we'd be rich. Well, we do.
So do you think this is how it is, this reality, this dimension that we're in? We have life evolves to a point, then when we begin looking back at what we did and adjusting it. Is it to learn, or is it to get better?
Here's the break point. So we're heading towards point zero, when we will have completed the first cycle. It'll have taken 3.7 billion years. And after that, everything will be clear and we will have everything under control. Because it seems to me probable, this is a philosophical thought more than most things in the book are hard science, but this is a bit of philosophy. I think it may be our role to stop the universe deteriorating, because they say ultimately the universe will be like a thin, even soup, just a tiny bit above absolute zero. It's got no future, ultimately, in the huge distance. But maybe as humans, our role is to turn the universe into something really thinking, thoughtful, and big, the whole thing. And we will be in the driving seat once we get to a point of maturity. And we need that big nudge, because we'll be told, if we open DNA and it says, stop that nonsense in Ukraine, stop, whatever, stop doing this, start doing that, we will have instructions, because they're coming from our own future. So they know what we've done, what we're currently doing, and they'll guide us through it. We'll be entering a whole new golden age. All we've got to do is apply these numbers to the DNA. It's not a big deal. It just takes a few scientists with enough imagination and nous to.
Yeah. The book's called They Built the Earth, Then Seeded Life 3.7 billion years ago. My guest today has been Christopher Knight. As we conclude, Chris, have you followed the yugas, the Indian system of time? It's huge numbers, hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And you have to think about these ancient cultures that developed the megalithic yard as understanding the intricacies of life a little bit better than we do now.
I think there's been peaks in the past. I mean, I was speaking at a science conference over 25 years ago now, and over dinner talking to a professor from Stanford who's expert on the way the brain works in terms of its quantum mechanic effects and all sorts of things. And he said, the more we learn, the more we realize what we thought was right is not right. And the more we realize that the ancient people of India had it right. So there have been insights in the past. I suspect there were, I don't know if there were ways that they were in touch with things, or it feels like there were connections in the past, and maybe instructions were given at different points in time. I don't know, but there clearly has been huge nuggets of information dropped, like the megalithic system of measurement, the megalithic yard.
Yeah.
That's come from something super ancient that was established long ago.
Would you say it's like pre-Diluvian, or extremely old, the megalithic yard?
It's not impossible at all. Far from it. And again, I was with a professor in Scotland for several days. He was head of geology at Cambridge University, and I was discussing with him the flood, biblical flood, and I said, of course, it can't have happened. And he said, why? And he said, you're thinking of a closed system. It could have happened, and it apparently did happen. And he gave me all the references. So it appears there was a flood dating, 11,000, 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, very easily, they could have been high technology before that. It's not beyond the bounds of probability, let alone possibility. The world is not as simple as some people would like it to be.
No, and our ancestors knew a lot more than we think we give them
Absolutely,
credit for.
that's for sure.
Yeah. They built the Earth just came out. I think it just came out in May, right?
Yeah,
So you can get it on Amazon. And your website is theybuilttheearth.com, correct?
yeah, with dashes between the words. They dash built dash the dash
Oh,
earth.com.
right. They dash built dash they. Okay, good. Where else can people learn about you? Are you on YouTube?
Although Alan and I are reviewing that, we possibly need to be, because we've just got to push. Our target is to get 81 leading scientists behind this. 81 because that's the part of the number value, 3 to the power of 4 that's built into the system. And if we can get even a small percentage of them on board, we can start to push this along. So not on YouTube at the minute, but we soon will be, hopefully.
So 81 to contribute to a white paper, or 81 to acknowledge that you have something?
81 to take the time to look. If they want to come up and say, well, we think that's all nonsense, do that. Yeah, fine. Just explain why, because it's not our data. We're just putting the data together from other squeaky clean sources.
Yeah, fantastic. Chris, a real pleasure. Much success on this book.
Thank you.
It was good speaking with you.
Okay, pleasure, Cliff. Thank you.